Welcome to Awakening the Voice of Truth podcast with Dr. Raleigh Washington. Let God's truth be told, heard, and obeyed. In episode 3, Dr. Washington is interviewed by his youngest daughter, Pastor Petra Scott. They discuss his upbringing and childhood, why relationships matter, his college days, and baseball's pivotal role in his life. The conversation continues with how he met baseball legend Hank Aaron, his military service, finding Jesus, Yeshua, becoming a pastor, the church gaining national recognition, and how he dealt with race relations in his church.
Hello. This is officially the Awakening the Voice of Truth podcast takeover. For those that don't know me, I am Raleigh's youngest daughter. My name is Petra Scott. I'm a pastor, an author, a wife, a mom, and whatever else I need to be in whatever moment I need to be it. I am so excited, Dad, to be here with you today on your podcast. And when you asked me to join, I thought it'd be really cool if we did a podcast really talking about who is this man that's behind the voice of truth. You know, you're passionate about what you do in ministry, what you do for the kingdom of God, but not many people know much about Raleigh the man. And I said, today we can pull back the veil on who this amazing man is. So Dad, why don't you just start with telling us a little bit about where you grew up and your family dynamics, how you grew up in your childhood.
I have started by saying a dream that has come true. I grew up right here in Jacksonville, Florida. I lived in what was called a project, Blodgett Homes. And I had a great life there. I had a single mom and a brother. And we grew up in Jacksonville during the Jim Crow area. And Jim Crow, for what people don't know, is a time when discrimination against blacks was legal.
Mm. So you grew up with Grandma Tommy, Uncle Skin, who we called Uncle Skin affectionately. His name was Lorenzo. And tell me about your relationship with your dad. Did you have an active dad in your life, or was it just pretty much Grandma Tommy?
It was Grandma Tommy. I knew my dad, and I got to work with him in his cleaners various times. But my upbringing was my mama.
That's awesome. So you grew up being raised by a strong Black woman.
Absolutely.
Grandma Tommy didn't take no mess, did she?
She didn't.
She was a no-nonsense kind of woman.
My signature for my mom was this. Don't lie to me, Raleigh. If you lie, you steal. If you steal, you kill. If you kill, they're going to put you in jail. And I'm going to tell the jailers to throw away the key.
Wow.
That's what she said. And I believed her.
So she was preparing you for your future military training.
Absolutely.
So tell us about high school. Where'd you go to high school? What were some of the activities you did in high school?
I went to high school at New Stanton. Old Stanton was on Ashley Street. Boy, that was the main drag downtown. But I went to New Stanton. The first class in New Stanton to start in the 10th grade and go to the 12th grade.
Yeah.
I played baseball and ended up going to college with a scholarship for baseball.
Wow.
So it was that way. I was president of the dance club.
Now tell the people why you were president of the Creative Dance Club.
Because I had Google eyes for the dance teacher.
What's really cool, Dad, is since we moved back to Jacksonville, I've got to go with you a couple times. You still meet with the class of, is it 46 or 56?
56.
So you still meet every month with the class of 1956.
Hi.
And you guys get together, you guys play games, you talk, you've spoken a couple times and given the opportunity for people to come to know the Lord. But tell me why that's important to you. Why at 86 years old are you still connecting with people from your high school?
I have about a dozen to 15 class members who started, 20 plus years ago, saying, we just need to stay in touch with one another. We need to stay active. We need to do things together. And we're all in our mid-80s, and that's what we're doing. And we have a picnic every year. We're going to a retreat somewhere, do something.
Yeah.
But we are active.
I love that. One of my favorite memories is going to one of the reunion times with you and them all calling you Tarzan.
Yes.
I said, wait a minute now. Why they calling Dad Tarzan?
Yeah.
Tell them why they called you Tarzan.
Yeah. Tarzan was my nickname in school because they were having teachers' meetings or some serious problems they had to settle. So they had all of the students, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, into the auditorium, and we would stay there almost all day. We did that for several days. But during the time, they would ask kids to sing or to dance, to do something like that. And I used to do this funny thing about a movie called Tarzan. I had a harmonica that I could not play, and in it we would say, help me, Tarzan. I said, wonk, 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 on the thing like that. And I go, and so the kids in the class kept nudging me, so they kept telling the vice principal to call me. And he says, and I would never go. So he said, son, stand up. He says, are you coming or not? He frightened me. So I went up and I did that. Help me, Tarzan. Wah, wah, wah. And the place went, wow. I became a star performer for doing this. Help me, Tarzan. And that was my nickname from that time on.
So you were destined for stages your entire life.
Absolutely.
One thing that I really love is, I know in your book, one word, the epicenter of it is this valuing of relationships.
Yes.
And to accomplish the things you've accomplished, to travel the world at times, but still make time every month to be present for your high school class. I think that says a lot about your character and a lot about how you value not just ministry or beneficial relationships, but how you value all your relationships. So that's pretty cool, Dad.
Absolutely. Relationships is who I am.
Yeah.
All about relationships.
So now we go from Stanton High School. You said you played baseball and you got a full ride scholarship. Is that correct?
Yes.
To Florida A&M University, a historically Black university. Tell us about FAMU. I almost said FAMU, but FAMU, Florida A&M University. Tell us about just that full ride baseball scholarship, your passion for baseball, and a little bit about your time in college.
Yeah, I went to Florida A&M, and the two things that stand out during my time there was ROTC, which was mandatory for every state college for 2 years. I loved it, and I went 4 years. I graduated with a commission as a second lieutenant. And I played baseball, did very well in baseball, so much so until I had a contract offer to join the Chicago Cubs farm system upon graduation.
I think we need to pause and drop the mic on that one. So you were so well, or you did so well in baseball that you received a professional contract to play for the Chicago Cubs. Now, tell us a little bit about the dynamics of baseball, specifically for African-American men during that time you were extended that contract.
And the year would have been 1960.
Okay.
And there weren't a whole lot of African-Americans in baseball. As you know, Jackie Robinson in 1948 broke the race barrier. So the African-Americans who were in baseball, they are now in the Hall of Fame. Ernie Banks for the Chicago Cubs, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella for the Willie Mays for the Giants, Larry Doby for the Cleveland Indians. They were all very, very good. And so I really wanted to go to see if I was as good as Larry Doby, Willie Mays, or whatever. But I also had, upon graduation, a commission to be a second lieutenant in the military.
Wow.
I pondered over that. I wanted to do both, but I couldn't. I ultimately chose saying, I'm the first college graduate in my family. If I take the commission, I'll be the first commissioned officer. I took that, and I was a commissioned officer in the military. And as I look back on it, it was a good decision and the right decision, because in the military, I learned how to be an officer and a gentleman. I learned integrity of work and activity. I learned how to be a leader of men in the military. And that helped me throughout life, and especially when I became a Christian and gave my life to the Lord.
That's awesome. I think even for those just listening that are younger and face decisions where you're kind of at this crossroads sometimes of what do I want to do with my life? Do I want to go with something that can be beneficial for the long run, or do I want to go with something that aligns with my passion right now? So just seeing you really weigh that option. But what stands out to me is that you chose something that you knew would also be beneficial for your family. You said you were the first to graduate college in your family, but then you would also be the first to become, what was it,
A commission
a
officer.
commissioned officer in the United States military. And so the way you made those decisions, I think that's something to learn from. It's exemplary as a leader to just understand that processing of how those decisions are made. So you made the decision to go into the military. And I think something that's pretty cool, you should tell us a little more about. God honored, that decision. Tell us, when you were stationed in Puerto Rico, who was it that you were able to bring in to help you do some recruiting in Puerto Rico?
While in college, I played baseball with Bill Lucas. He was 2 years in front of me. Bill Lucas was a catcher and a shortstop on the team when I was out there, but we were very, very good friends. Well, Bill Lucas got to be AAA. He went into baseball, and he became the first commissioner, the first general manager of a professional baseball team, which was the Atlanta Braves. And his sister married Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
And while I was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico, in charge of recruiting, I called Bill and said, Bill, you got to help me get Hank Aaron to come and help recruiting in Puerto Rico. He says, Raleigh, I'll set you up with can you get here Monday? I'll set you up with a 2-hour luncheon with him.
Wow.
I'm not going to do it for you. You're going to have to do it yourself. I did. I went there. We had a 2-hour luncheon. I convinced him. He said, but I'm going to give you one secret. His first child was born in Caguas, Puerto Rico.
Wow.
With that, I won. Hank and Billy Aaron came to Puerto Rico, helped me with recruiting, helped us to become the #1 district recruiting command in the entire United States Army. We were #1.
Wow.
And Hank Aaron helped that to become a reality.
That's amazing. For those that don't know or aren't like major baseball fans, Hank Aaron, he broke Babe Ruth's record.
Exactly.
And
He
he did it with a lot of sacrifice. I know he received a lot of death threats.
Absolutely.
And, just endured some real intense racism during that time.
Absolutely.
But he was a stand-up guy that helped you achieve something.
He did indeed.
So you got to fulfill a little bit of a baseball dream while you were still in the military.
Hallelujah.
Dad, I know a lot of people know this story of injustice that you faced in the military. And if you don't know, you got to check out his book, One Word. You give your full story of just what you had to overcome in the military during the time you served. But my favorite story about your time serving is when you worked for the Pentagon in the division or the branch for prisoners of war. Can you share with us what you did for the Pentagon and just your favorite story or memory from that time you served?
I was stationed in the Pentagon, and I was chief of the POW MIA branch, prisoner of war, missing in action. And I did that for 2 years. It was a great job because I was in charge of all of the casualty records of everyone who was a prisoner or missing in action. And 2 or 3 times a year, all of those families would come to Washington, D.C., and I would sit down with the family members, go over the casualty record, and we would go over detail exactly how they became a prisoner of war or missing in action. Probably the #1 memory I have is the wife of Master Sergeant Will Moore. He was missing in action. What happened is his wife and daughter came. His daughter was now 15 years old. He'd been missing in action and possibly a prisoner for 4 years.
Wow.
And so she came in and she said, Major, I was a major then, Major Washington, my daughter thinks that I need to get on with my life. said, my husband has been gone 4 years, so he's not coming back. They're not even sure that whether he's a prisoner of war. And so she says, I should get on with my life. So, Major, what do you think I should do? And I looked at her and I said, let's look at the casualty records. He was a master sergeant. He was in special forces. He got wounded in action, and he was climbing up a rope to be pulled up to the helicopter. But because he was wounded, when he got near the helicopter, he couldn't hold on any longer, and he fell down. Because your husband was a trained ranger, and he was a trained parachutist, and paratrooper, and he knew how to fall, I think there's a reasonable possibility and probability that he didn't get killed for the fall because he knew how to fall. And if that's the case, he's possibly a prisoner. So if I were you, this is my recommendation. Give him at least another year.
Wow.
Say, give him another year. And she looked at her daughter and said, see, the major said, give him another year. I'm going to give him another year. And she left. 6 months later, I had the pleasure and the joy to call her to tell her that her husband was a prisoner and he was coming home. That was probably my most precious memory.
I can hear that story over and over again and still get the goosebumps and the chills when I hear it. But my favorite thing about that story is I love seeing how God connects the dots in our lives. I learned this from Paul Wilbur, that in the Hebrew language, which is the language of God, there is no word for coincidence, that nothing happens by coincidence, that God is very intentional about each and everything that we experience in our lives, and it connects for a greater purpose and a greater reason. So here you are, just ministering. You weren't a believer at that time, correct?
That's right.
But you're really having this intuitive pastoral inclination towards this woman and her daughter to tell them, hey, hold on, don't lose hope. And you kind of reasoned through his training and his experience how he could have possibly survived. But to do that in the context of not knowing that 6 months later he was going to come home, I feel like the Lord intentionally allowed you to have that position to really prepare you for a pastor's heart and a pastoral heart.
Bill McCartney, my good friend, would call it divine design.
There you go.
And so, Petra, I always loved people. My degree was in psychology, the study of human behavior.
Wow.
I was in the Adjutant General's Corps. It was all about personnel and administration. So that was a hankering. As you said, the Lord was preparing me for pastoral ministry, even at that time.
There it is. So if I had to put a theme to your life in the arc of how your life has gone, even all the way up to the military where we are right now, there's this constant theme of relationship that's there in this arc of your life. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Without question.
So from the military, you left the military, and I know that about, I want to say maybe the year prior to you leaving the military is when you found the Lord, when you and Mom got saved and dedicated your lives to God. Tell us a little bit about that.
We're stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico, in charge of recruiting in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, loving what I was doing. It was my wife, Paulette, your mom, whom God touched. She had a friend, Martha Lopez, who was in her GED class, and she told Martha, she was talking about wanting to change her life, not living right. I mean, we weren't saved, and we were living like unsaved people, doing what unsaved people do. And that is, and so she said, Martha, I want to change my life. And so Martha said, if you want to change your life, you need to give your life to Jesus. And she literally led your mom to the Lord. When she did that, when your mom came home, I looked at her. The moment I saw her, Petra, I knew she was changed. I knew it was permanent. I knew that I wanted to have that as well. And she said to me, I gave my life to Jesus. You got to do the same thing. I was proud. I was a lieutenant colonel. I was a man about town. I had the biggest house on base. I was like Muhammad Ali. I could float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. And so when I pride, I say, you can't tell me. I have to do that myself. But after several days of interacting, even when she even said to me, honey, I'm clean and you're dirty because I've given my life to Jesus. Well, you promise not to touch me until you give your life to Jesus. That's not what we recommend, but it worked. But it worked with me. Long story short, 2 weeks to the day after she did that, I came home from work at her invitation because Martha and Giaz was graduating with a GED course, and went into the room, and the Spirit of the Lord just came over me. What all I'd been hearing from Paulette came true. I fell to my knees and gave my life to the Lord. Confessed that I was a sinner, asked Jesus Christ to come into my heart to be my Savior and to be my Lord. And I started, and so I after I did it, I didn't know what to do, so I kind of cracked open the door and said, Paulette, she almost took the hinges off the door because she'd asked the Lord, I know you're going to save him. I want to be there. Will you let me know? And when I walked past her that day, the Spirit said to her, he's going to do it, and I did. So we started our walk in faith together. 2 weeks apart, we came to the Lord, and that's it. And 2 months after that, I was talking to Paulette, and I said, Paulette, I'm a lieutenant colonel, and I did well as a lieutenant colonel because of one thing. I memorized the regulation. I knew the word of regulation army, and I did everything, and my soldiers always did according to the regulation book, and we passed inspections, made great scores. I say, we've given our life to Jesus. We have a new regulation, and that regulation is the Word of God. So we've got to read it and memorize it and live our life according to that. You know, nobody taught me that, but that was probably the most profound thing that I could have done.
Wow.
And that started my journey as being a man of the Word.
So you leave the military, and I know you went to seminary. You went to Trinity Divinity School, correct?
Yes.
And you were there in Chicago or in Illinois, and then the Lord put it on your heart to plant a church in Chicago, Illinois. Tell us just a little bit about your experience as a pastor on the west side of Chicago. And why don't you give us one of your best memories or favorite memories from your time pastoring, and what is something that you wish you would have known prior to pastoring?
I felt this call to preach. And I said, but I need to get prepared. And so I ended up going to the seminary, Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, earned a Master of Divinity degree. Upon graduation, they recruited me because that school was a part of the Evangelical Free Church of America.
Wow.
They recruited me to be a church planter. So I planted a church in Chicago on the west side, the hood. We call it the Rock of Our Salvation Evangelical Free Church. And there we ministered and really we grew. I probably the highlight of my time there is I had a good friend that I met, Glenn K. Ryan, who was white. We became partners in ministry. He was executive director of Circle Urban Ministries, Christian doctors, lawyers, counselors. My church, I planted right in the midst of his organization. And we had a holistic ministry approach.
Wow.
And in the process of doing that, Glenn and I end up co-authoring a book entitled Breaking Down Walls, a model of reconciliation in an age of racial strife. And so out of my time there in Chicago, the church was racially mixed. I planted the church with 5 seminarians, 2 black, 3 white, and we started with our friends. So our friends were black friends with the two and white friends with the word. So it started out as a mixed church. And that church in the mid-'80s was 65% black, 35% white, at a time when that was not a popular thing to do. And so my greatest joy and all was the fact that we had a mixed church. We were recognized for that. We got awards for doing that. I preached all across America and internationally in the ministry of reconciliation all because of that. And so that was the positive dynamic. The one thing that I wish I had learned in all of that is Coach McCartney used to call me the pastor. So I had the gift of brevity, which means I talked a lot, too much. If I had to change one thing, I would change my almost 2.5-hour services to an hour service, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. And I just think I'd have done a lot better and accomplished a lot more when I look back at it, because we did well, but we had 2.5-hour services. So I like everything that happened, but if I had to change one thing, I would have changed that.
That's awesome. So you go from pastoring, and I think something that's really awesome that took place while you were pastoring in Chicago is there was one of the, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was one of the most popular news journalists in the world, Peter Jennings. They picked up a story on you and what you were doing at the church for racial reconciliation and unity. So just tell us really quickly about what happened with Peter Jennings and how you guys were on national news as a church on the west side of Chicago.
One of my favorite families and person in the church was Kathy Woods. Yeah, Kathy Woods. Thank you, darling. I had a senior moment.
Okay.
Kathy Woods was just one of my favorite. I mean, she was bubbly. She was of the lighter hue, and she was white, but she just loved reconciliation, everything about it. Well, her husband, cousin was Peggy Waymeyer. Peggy Waymeyer was in the religion department for Peter Jennings. And so she knew about the church through Kathy and her husband.
Wow.
And when she learned about it, she said she talked Peter Jennings into letting them do a bit.
That's amazing.
So she came down and spent a full day taping what we call our fudge ripple meeting.
What was the fudge ripple meeting?
What was the fudge ripple meeting? Once a quarter, we would have on a Sunday, during the Sunday school hour, I would get all of the African Americans together. We'd talk about the church from the black perspective, and we'd write our questions down on 3x5 cards. Nobody signed them. I just wanted to know what the issue was, not who did it. Then after church, the African Americans, which was large numbers, would I would have the whites go first, and they would get their fried chicken plates and go to the chapel, while the blacks would get their plates and go to the gym. During that eating time, I would meet with the whites in the church, and I call that my vanilla meeting. See, with the blacks, I call it my chocolate meeting, and with the whites, I call it my vanilla meeting. We would talk about the church from the white perspective, did 3x5 cards. After that, we would all come together.
Wow.
I call that my fudge ripple meeting. And we would talk about those same things that we talked in the separate groups. We talk about them in the groups together. All of that was to understand each other, understand how to live together, deal with issues that come up forthrightly. We did that. So that's what we did. And the makings of those meetings provided the 8 biblical principles of reconciliation
Yeah.
that we put into the book.
Yeah. That's amazing.
In episode 4, Dr. Washington continues his conversation with his youngest daughter, Pastor Petra Scott. They discuss his transition to Promise Keepers and making a global impact, his relationship with legendary coach Bill McCartney, partnering with Jewish believers, and co-founding a new ministry, as well as who he is as a father and husband.